Today we embark on an extraordinary journey through time to explore the most significant week for Christians worldwide, Holy Week. This sacred week is marked by a series of monumental events in the life of Jesus Christ, events that lay at the heart of the Christian faith. Holy Week is filled with spiritual depth and hidden meanings, and we will walk through the days leading up to Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, from Palm Sunday to Maundy Thursday, to better understand its profound importance. Jesus' earthly ministry began with powerful teachings, healing miracles, and confrontations with the religious authorities of his time. He challenged the traditions and rigid interpretations of Jewish law, revealing a deeper spiritual meaning that emphasized love, compassion, and mercy. In his parables, Jesus illustrated these divine truths, inviting people to inner transformation and genuine faith in God. The religious leaders of the time were increasingly threatened by his influence. While his teachings brought many closer to God, they also drew ire from those in positions of authority. One of the most pivotal moments leading up to Holy Week was the resurrection of Lazarus. Recorded in the Gospels, this miracle is one of the most astonishing demonstrations of Jesus' divine power. Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, had fallen gravely ill and died while Jesus was away. By the time Jesus arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. Jesus stood before Lazarus' tomb, deeply moved by the mourning of his friends and the pain death brings. With divine authority, he commanded, "Lazarus, come out." John 11:43. Against all human expectations, Lazarus emerged from the grave, wrapped in burial cloths, alive once again. This miracle didn't just awe the onlookers, it symbolized Jesus' ultimate power over death and foreshadowed his own resurrection. However, for the religious authorities, the resurrection of Lazarus was the last straw. With growing concern over Jesus' popularity and his threat to their control, they began plotting his death. They feared that the influence Jesus held over the people would destabilize their power and cause unrest under Roman rule. Lazarus' return to life became a flashpoint, triggering the sequence of events that would soon lead to the crucifixion. As the tension mounted, Jesus made a deliberate choice to enter Jerusalem, signaling the beginning of Holy Week. This wasn't just a symbolic act, it was the fulfillment of ancient messianic prophecies. The event we now call Palm Sunday is detailed in the Gospels, most notably in Matthew 21:1-11. Jesus sent 2 of his disciples to retrieve a donkey and its colt, fulfilling the prophecy from Zechariah 9:9. "See, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey." Jesus entered Jerusalem humbly, riding on a donkey, as crowds gathered to greet him with shouts of Hosanna and laid palm branches and cloaks in his path. This act of laying down palms symbolized victory and peace, and the crowd saw in Jesus their long-awaited Messiah, the one who would deliver Israel. The atmosphere was electric with hope and anticipation. However, while the people hailed him as a king, the religious leaders watched with suspicion and fear. To them, this public display of support for Jesus was a direct challenge to their authority and a potential spark for rebellion. Holy Monday followed, and with it came one of Jesus' most dramatic public actions. Jesus returned to the temple in Jerusalem, where he found money changers and merchants turning the holy place into a marketplace. In an act of righteous anger, Jesus overturned the tables and drove out the merchants, declaring, "My house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers." Matthew 21:13. This was not just a cleansing of the temple, it was a declaration about the true nature of worship. Jesus was calling the people back to sincere devotion, urging them to seek God with hearts of faith rather than through empty rituals. Holy Monday reminds us that true worship transcends religious formalities and requires a heart fully devoted to God. Jesus' actions in the temple reveal his deep zeal for purity in worship and his rejection of the commercialization of faith. It challenges us to reflect on our own spiritual practices and to ensure that our relationship with God is marked by authenticity and devotion. As we move to Holy Tuesday, the tension escalated. Jesus returned to the temple once more, where he engaged in confrontations with the religious leaders. On this day, he delivered several parables, each one aimed at exposing the hypocrisy and moral blindness of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Among these was the parable of the 2 sons, Matthew 21:28-32, where Jesus contrasted the behavior of 2 sons, one who initially refused his father's request but later obeyed, and the other who promised to obey but did not follow through. The message was clear. It is not enough to simply give lip service to God. True obedience comes from actions. Jesus followed this with the parable of the wicked tenants, Matthew 21:33-46, which foreshadowed his own rejection by the religious authorities. In this story, a landowner's tenants refused to give him his due and killed his servants and even his son. The religious leaders, realizing Jesus was speaking about them, became even more determined to arrest him. Yet Jesus continued, undeterred, proclaiming truths that would outlast the opposition of his enemies. On Holy Wednesday, the Gospels tell of a quieter day, but one filled with dark undercurrents. Judas Iscariot, one of Jesus' 12 disciples, struck a deal with the chief priests to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, Matthew 26:14-16. This betrayal set the final events of Holy Week into motion, as Judas prepared to hand over his master to those who sought his life. The tension reached its peak on Maundy Thursday, the day of the Last Supper. This meal was no ordinary gathering. It was Jesus' final Passover meal with his disciples before his crucifixion. During this meal, Jesus instituted what would become known as the Holy Communion, or Eucharist. He took bread, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "This is my body." Then he took a cup of wine and said, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." Matthew 26:26-28. In this moment, Jesus revealed the sacrificial nature of his coming death and the establishment of a new covenant between God and humanity. During the supper, Jesus also foretold two critical events: his betrayal by Judas and Peter's denial. Jesus' words, "One of you will betray me," filled the disciples with sorrow and confusion, but Judas remained silent in his treachery. Later that night, Peter, one of Jesus' most devoted followers, would deny knowing Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed, just as Jesus had predicted. After the meal, Jesus and his disciples went to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. There, in a moment of deep anguish, Jesus cried out to God, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Matthew 26:39. Jesus' prayer reveals the depth of his humanity as he faced the horrors of the cross, but it also demonstrated his total submission to the will of the Father. It was in this garden that Judas arrived with a group of soldiers to arrest Jesus. Betraying him with a kiss, Judas handed Jesus over to the authorities. As the disciples scattered in fear, Jesus was taken to face the religious leaders in a series of unjust trials that would ultimately lead to his crucifixion. The events of Holy Week are filled with powerful moments that resonate deeply within the Christian faith. From the triumph of Palm Sunday to the agony of Gethsemane and the institution of the Holy Communion, these days mark the culmination of Jesus' earthly ministry and the beginning of his ultimate act of love, his sacrifice on the cross for the redemption of humanity. As we move closer to Good Friday and the resurrection on Easter Sunday, we are called to reflect on the immense love, grace, and mercy that Jesus displayed during his final days on earth. Thank you for joining us. Please remember to subscribe and share this video to help spread these powerful messages. Hugs, and may God's peace be with you.